Every desert keeps its ghosts. Some ride alone, waiting for forgiveness to find them. The sun hung low, red as a dying ember, when Elias Cain rode into Red Hollow. The wind stirred up little devils of dust that danced around his horse's hooves like whispers. His shadow stretched long across the empty street, a quiet outlaw in a town that had forgotten mercy. No one greeted him. The saloon doors creaked. The blacksmith stopped his hammer mid-strike, and a woman across the street pulled her child inside by the wrist. Elias dismounted slowly, his boots meeting the earth with the heaviness of memory. He had once been a name folks spoke with awe and fear. Now he was just a man trying to stay upright under the weight of what he'd done, or what they said he'd done. The sign above the diner swung in the wind. Clara's Cookhouse. The smell of stew and coffee floated out like a promise. He followed it, because hunger was simpler than redemption. Sometimes the kindest hands tremble when they offer grace. Inside, the diner was quiet, save for the tick of the wall clock and the faint hiss of soup on the stove. Clarabelle stood behind the counter, her sleeves rolled, a strand of hair escaping her bun. Her face carried the soft ruin of grief, beautiful in the way something endures a storm and keeps standing. Elias took a seat by the window. The few men inside stiffened, their forks halting mid-air. Someone muttered, "That's him, the gun hand from Bitter Creek." Clara hesitated, then ladled stew into a bowl and placed it before him. Her hand trembled just enough for him to notice. Their eyes met, hers clear as creek water after rain, his shadowed and searching. "Thank you," he said quietly. She nodded once, then turned away, pretending to polish the counter though her pulse beat hard in her neck. From the corner table, Deputy Hollis Reed watched, his jaw set. He had been waiting 2 years for Clara to look at him that way. But her gaze, tonight, had wandered toward the wrong man. In small towns, truth is never as loud as gossip. By sunrise, every porch in Red Hollow buzzed with talk. The widow fed the killer. He'll bring trouble. She always had strange taste in men. Elias felt the stares as he walked down the main street toward the livery. He considered saddling up and riding out before the sun climbed too high. But before he could, Clara appeared behind him, her voice soft but firm. "If every soul who ever got talked about left this town," she said, "we'd have nothing left but tumbleweed." He looked at her, really looked. Her eyes held the same kind of courage he'd lost somewhere between whiskey and regret. That afternoon, Elias stayed. He repaired the corral behind her diner, fixed loose boards, and mended the old fence line. Each hammer strike sounded like an apology he couldn't speak aloud. By evening, Clara left a plate of biscuits and a jar of coffee by his door. No note, just quiet kindness under the pink wash of sunset. Deputy Reed saw it all from the sheriff's porch. His mouth thinned to a bitter line. Some hearts rebuild not with love, but with the simple act of staying. Days stretched into weeks. Red Hollow carried on with its slow rhythm. Cows bawling at dusk, church bells on Sunday, dust settling over everything like a second skin. Elias found peace in the ordinary. The scrape of a chair, the call of a train miles away, the way Clara hummed tunelessly as she kneaded bread. Sometimes she'd bring him a slice still warm, and he'd nod thanks without speaking. They didn't need words. The silence between them said everything. But peace in the West was fragile as glass. One evening, Hollis cornered Clara outside the diner, his voice low, full of bruised pride. "You think he's changed?" "Men like him don't. They drag death behind them." Clara met his eyes, her tone calm as morning. "I've known death longer than you've known duty." And she walked away. That night, the deputy drank until his anger felt righteous. Every redemption is tested by fire. The storm came sudden, wild, as if the sky itself split open. Lightning forked across the mesa. Rain hammered rooftops. Then a shout tore through the downpour. The old barn near the well was burning. Elias was the first to reach it. Flames licked high, turning the night orange. Inside, horses screamed and kicked against the stalls. Without thinking, he plunged in. Heat scalded his face. Smoke clawed his lungs. He cut the ropes, guided one terrified mare toward the door. Then he saw a boy, maybe 10, trapped behind a fallen beam. "Hold on!" Elias shouted, his voice swallowed by the roar. He shoved the timber aside, pain searing through his shoulder, and pushed the boy clear. A moment later, the roof began to give. A beam crashed down, pinning Elias to the ground. Through the rain-blurred chaos, Clara ran, skirts soaked, hair undone, heart pounding like a drum. "Elias!" she screamed, diving into the smoke. She pulled at the burning wood with raw, blistered hands until she freed him. Together, they stumbled into the rain as the barn collapsed behind them in a thunder of flame and ash. For a long moment, the world held its breath. Then the townsfolk saw. The man they'd whispered against was the one who'd saved their children. The fire hissed into quiet. The shame in their faces burned brighter than the embers ever had. Mercy doesn't roar. It whispers through the smoke. Clara tended Elias that night in the dim light of her diner. His arm was bandaged, his face pale. Rain still whispered against the windows. When he stirred, his voice was hoarse. "I never meant to kill him." Back then, he drew first. "But no one believed me." Clara brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. "I know," she said simply. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, sleep came without nightmares. Outside, the rain eased, washing the soot from Red Hollow's streets. Dawn comes slow to those who've lived too long in darkness. Morning found the town different, quieter, gentler. Men tipped their hats when Clara passed. Even Deputy Reed came by, his face drawn, his hat held against his chest. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. Forgiveness hung in the air like the scent of wet earth. Elias stood by his horse, saddlebags packed. He'd never meant to stay this long, and now that peace had finally found him, it was time to go. That was the curse of men like him. They belonged everywhere and nowhere. Clara stepped forward, holding a small silver locket. "It was my husband's," she said softly. "For luck wherever the trail takes you?" He took it, fingers brushing hers. The air between them felt charged, sacred. He placed her hand against his chest, over his heartbeat. "If the world were kinder," he murmured, "I'd stay. No kiss, no promise. Just the truth, simple and unbearable." Then he swung into the saddle. She watched as he rode east, the morning sun turning him into a silhouette of gold and dust. Some goodbyes are too quiet for words, but the heart hears them anyway. Weeks passed. The barn was rebuilt. The gossip died. The town, once tight with judgment, loosened a little, like a hand unclenching after prayer. Clara's diner became a gathering place again. She laughed more now, though sometimes, when dawn painted the horizon pink, she'd set an extra cup of coffee on the counter. Always black, always steaming, waiting. Some nights she'd hear hoofbeats out on the distant trail and step to the door, heart thudding. But it was always just the wind. Still she smiled, because the wind carried memory, and memory was its own kind of return. The West never forgets. It just buries its pain beneath the sand until someone rides through to stir it up again. Years later, travelers passing through Red Hollow would hear the story. They'd ask about the widow who saved a gunslinger, and someone would point toward the diner, still standing, paint faded but proud. "Clara Bell," they'd say. "She tamed more than hunger in this town." "And the gunslinger?" They'd shrug. "Some say he rides the borderlands. Some say he died saving a stranger. But most reckon he found peace." The storyteller would lean closer, lowering his voice. "She still leaves that coffee cup every morning, mind you. Like she's waiting. Sometimes the souls we fear most are the ones who come to teach us mercy. And if you listen, truly listen, to the wind that drifts across Red Hollow at dusk, you might hear hooves on distant stone, faint as a heartbeat. Maybe it's just the wind. Maybe it's Elias Kane still riding. Either way, the desert remembers, and so should we, because every heart holds its own Wild West, a place where shame meets forgiveness, where silence speaks louder than bullets, and where love, in its quietest form, is brave enough to stay a while before riding on.